Chapter 11. Praying with Migrants in the Path of a Tornado. I had another unforgettable experience during the summer of 1954. It was greatly influenced by the work done by one of my classmates from Saginaw. He was in charge of the summer program in the Saginaw Diocese of Michigan. They ministered to the migrants who came up to pick beets in that area. Most of the Mexican-American migrants were from Texas. They were brought up in trucks to work the fields. Some of the migrants actually brought their whole families with them, kids and all. Picking beets was not easy. It was a job that called for a person who had a strong back, who was not subject to a sunstroke, and who would work for much less than the minimum wage. I recall reading about the experiment from one of the universities in Michigan in which they wanted to see if an ordinary student could endure the sun and pick beets along with the migrants. The majority of them could not. I offered to participate in their migrant program in Saginaw for the summer. No, thank you. I don't mean the work in the field, but simply as a driver for the Spanish priest who would serve their spiritual needs. The priest in question, Father Talavera, was from Spain and did not have a car nor a driver's license. I was given a car through the migrant program and was assigned to live and work out of the St. Anne's Church in Pinconning, a little town near Bay City, Michigan. The pastor, Father Burgett, appeared so happy and relieved to see me when I arrived at the rectory. "Thank God you're here," he said with a smile. "We are having an awful time communicating with Father Talavera. We have to make signs and gestures just to get through to each other. That's when we're lucky. We need you badly to translate for us." "I'm sorry," I said, "but I don't speak Spanish either. That's not part of my job, you know." Well, maybe I knew a few words like tacos and adios or si. One could hardly converse that way. "Well, what good are you?" He came right back at me. "I drive him to the camps where the migrants are. When he needs to get around, I'm his chauffeur. That's what my contract says." We all became frustrated. Father Burgett could speak English and French, so could I, but it was of little help. Father Talavera was limited to Castilian Spanish. What to do? We tried conversing in Latin, but it was obvious that our vocabulary was based on book knowledge and not on everyday conversation. We succeeded, but with great difficulty. In the seminary, I learned languages fast, so I decided to learn Spanish as fast as possible. Communication could be a major problem, and it certainly was. Planning our day, going to the migrant camp, setting up meetings, scheduling masses and discussion groups, training young ones in a religious education program, preparing couples for marriage and families for baptism of their children, and a host of other problems quickly developed. The very first day I arrived in Pinconning, I went to a bookstore and bought a Spanish-English dictionary out of absolute necessity and desperation. Father Talavera's interest in English was not as strong as my desire to speak Spanish. The dictionary went with me everywhere. I was looking up words all day long. The good padre would pronounce the word for me if there were any doubt. I often pointed to a word in the dictionary in the middle of a conversation to make sure I was conveying the right message to him. Naturally, when he wanted me to understand something very important, he would do the same. I had read somewhere that one needs approximately 1,000 words in a language to carry on a fluent conversation. That wasn't me. In the beginning, my Spanish was definitely broken and with a typical American accent. But I was not afraid to make a mistake, and I would ask the migrants for the word I was obviously trying to say. They were patient and happy that I was at least trying. It was such fun teaching religion to the children. My vocabulary was taken directly out of the book. The instruction book I used was a book of questions and answers. I would simply ask a question to the children. If they laughed, I knew I said the wrong thing. I would ask one of them to say it correctly and slowly. The children felt good about helping me. These young, innocent children who had no formal schooling were my teachers. I loved it. We laughed a lot. Sometimes I would just open my mouth and start to say a word, and the children were already laughing. I always looked forward to my job of teaching the children while Father Talavera took care of the adults. After a period of about 6 weeks, I was already reciting the rosary in Spanish. Father Talavera and I would go together to one of the camps on Sunday afternoon, their day off. He and I would then separate and join a different group of adults gathering in one of the small cabins where they lived. The cabin was a one-room facility. Everything took place in that one room. It was their kitchen, their bedroom, and their living room, with no toilet. I would guess the size of the cabin would be about 12 by 15 feet, certainly not bigger. On this unforgettable occasion, I was praying with about 10 people crowded in one of those very cabins. While we were at least halfway through the rosary, one of the migrants came up to me and said, "Padre, mira lo que está viniendo hacia nosotros." Translated means, "Padre, look what is coming toward us." I knew this had to be something really serious, very serious, for one of these men to interrupt a rosary. I stopped for a moment and looked out the window. The frightened expression on my face impelled them all to take a look. Coming straight toward us, about 300 yards away, was, without the slightest doubt, the awesome funnel of a tornado. It was tearing up everything in its path. Things were really flying around. Above the ominous black funnel were green clouds forming a circle around it. I had never seen green clouds before. We all had the same thoughts. We were in deep trouble. The end of our lives could come very soon. A couple of people started to make for the door. "No," I shouted in Spanish. "Don't go outside. You don't know which way the tornado is going. We will kneel here and pray. If we die praying." I have no idea where I got the strength to say that, and with such authority. There was no time to think. We prayed. Did we ever? Every word was spoken as if it were the last word we would ever say in our lifetime, on our deathbed. The noise got louder and louder. We desperately tried to pray with more faith than fear. We were totally in God's hands. What was God's will? Would the Lord save us from obvious destruction? We would know shortly. I couldn't help thinking of the tremendous power of a tornado. I read once that a tornado had the incredible atomic power to disintegrate, or the force to drive a feather into a tree like an arrow, or the sound of a locomotive driving right through you, or it could send us flying into the next county. The following is what did happen. I had 10 witnesses to testify to it. While we were still praying and the noise kept getting louder, drowning out our words, we looked at each other with an almost hopeless stare. Our eyes were saying goodbye, while our lips prayed with only a spark of faith remaining. To all appearances, we were not long for this world. First, there was a sense of being torn away from the ground on which the cabin rested. We then knew we were airborne. There was no doubt about it. We were flying, only we were not in control. I am sure I was not the only one having images of being bashed into a tree or tossed like a baseball into a field. I am sure horrid thoughts plagued us all. We did not have the impression we were moving fast through the air, just moving. It was as if at any moment we were going to hit something real hard and very fast. However, the noise started to subside, giving us the possible glimpse of hope that the tornado had passed by, and we were still alive, at least for the moment. I then had the distinct feeling of descending. We were going down. The feeling was confirmed when, to our surprise, we touched ground. We expected a crash landing. Rather, it was an incredibly soft landing. It was a great feeling to have landed and still be alive. We finished praying, then hurriedly dashed outside only to discover that the cabin was not in the same place as it was. We were moved ever so gently by, what else can I say, a gentle hand that must have reached down just before the dangerous moment and moved us away from the path of destruction. We were now several hundred feet from our original position. Did we really move that far through the air? Perhaps we only imagined it. We had to check it out. That was not hard to do. We found the original spot where the migrant family's cabin was prior to the tornado. A furrow about 5 feet deep and much wider was the result of the tornado's path as it made its way right through the place where we were kneeling. When speaking about it later, we all decided that the tornado itself did not treat us kindly as it noisily passed by. Rather, we were all in agreement that what happened to us was a miraculous event. The source had to be a power that had dominion over nature. The Lord had shown us his kindness and mercy. We were marked for death. Instead, we were given a new life and a deeper faith. We gathered together and, forming a circle of prayer, we expressed a gratitude that came from the very depth of our soul. Tears flowed, but they were tears of joy. The next day, as I read in the newspaper about the rash of tornadoes near Saginaw Bay, Michigan, I realized that I was in one of them, the one that visited the migrant campsite. Reading all the amount of damage that occurred in that whole region again affirmed my faith and trust in God's divine providence. Chapter 12. First Love. While my faith in God was strengthened enormously that summer, I also experienced for the first time in my life the power of love. I am not saying that I had never loved anyone before. I loved my parents with all my heart. I loved my 6 sisters and my brother very much. In fact, the mandate of Jesus to love God with all your heart and soul and to love my neighbor as myself was not a problem for me. It was my very love of people that was the driving power to serve them in priestly ministry. I had been trained since I was 14 to focus my energies on prayer, work, and play. There was a place for each of them. Holiness and wholeness were very much alike. They both depended on a good balance between physical, mental, and spiritual activity. My whole life centered on my studies and my preparation for the priesthood, which did not include a marriage partner. Romantic emotions and feelings had long been suppressed. In a sense, I felt immune, even invulnerable to a relationship with a woman. My life was so full that I had neither the time nor the interest to invest in such a relationship. Well, life is full of surprises and so unpredictable. I met a secretary at St. Anne's Rectory the first day I arrived. I expected her to be older. She turned out to be 1 year younger than I. Each day I would greet her with "Good morning" and a smile. When the pastor was not in and Father Talavera was not ready to make his daily rounds among the camps, I would spend a few moments talking to her. After all, we were nearly the same age, and the 2 priests were considerably older. After a few weeks, the conversations got longer. I enjoyed her company. After seeing her every day for over a month, the conversations became more and more personal. I wanted to know all about her family, her goals in life, her interests, and whatever else I could think of on a given day. She was equally interested in my background, what motivated me to go to the seminary. I was afraid at that time to tell her about the voice, my interests, etc. I had no idea what falling in love meant. I was 24 years old, but very innocent when it came to relationships, especially about a serious relationship between a man and a woman. But before I knew it, I was slowly moving in that direction. I was growing sad as the days speeded by and I would have to leave Pinconning and the most wonderful girl I had ever met. Not that I had any other such experiences. I'm reluctant to mention her name, but her family name was very popular in the local community at the time. The time came, of course, to go back to the seminary. I returned to the seminary that fall. Every part of me was confined within the seminary walls except my heart. My heart was still in Pinconning. I spent many sleepless nights going over the past events of that summer, the work with the migrants, which was very gratifying, learning to speak a little Spanish, the incredible escape from a ravaging tornado, and especially the awakening feeling for a lovely, desirable friend. I prayed a lot. We had to participate in morning and night prayers every day, but my prayers invaded the classroom, the study hall, and even the sports events. When alone at night, I knew that I had to bring this dilemma to a conclusion. It came during a retreat in which my spiritual life was at its highest point. I finally wrote a letter explaining everything I felt to my dear friend. She must have read it with tears in her eyes. I know I did. Several days later, I received a letter from her. She was very unhappy about the decision she knew in her heart I had to make. Of the two loves, I felt my destiny was tied to the priesthood in a way that was greater than myself. It was as if I was drawn to the priesthood by a vocation that called out to me from the world beyond. Regardless of what I believed, it was a heart-rending experience. In spite of already saying goodbye, I still felt I had to call her on the phone to hear her voice once more and to clarify what I had written. We talked for a long time, and we ended as good friends, whose time to take the big step had not come. Near the end of the summer, before returning to the seminary, I asked Father Talavera and Father Murillo, a friend of his visiting from Spain, if they would like to meet my parents. They were very happy to just relax and spend a day away from the migrant camps, for the work was long and tedious. My parents had sold the store and moved further east, but still in Detroit. I realized I had to play the role of interpreter as I did back at St. Anne's, that is, once my Spanish was good enough. But this situation was more complicated. My father was speaking to me in Arabic, my mother spoke in English, the two priests spoke only in Spanish. It turned into a hilarious comedy of errors. I wasn't used to switching languages that fast, and often found myself speaking to my dad in Spanish and English to Father Talavera. They would throw their hands up in the air. It was getting more confused by the moment as this fun fest went on. Eventually, I settled down, got my languages in order, and we had a wonderful conversation over a great meal. The meal was especially appreciated since I had a deep longing for my mother's home cooking. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for the next reading of Father J. Samonie's book.